Hi everyone and welcome to the Tech Recruitment podcast. Today I have a special guest to interview. His name is Steve Rothberg, and Steve is the president of College Recruiter, which is a job site platform. It's a career site platform or job board, we can also call it. So a College Recruiter helps college graduates get a better job, a dream job at the end. So Steve has been running this company for about 20 years. And of course, they went through lots of ups and downs. And this is exactly what we are going to talk about. Because a lot of people who are listening to this podcast or watching my videos on YouTube may struggle with getting things off the ground. You know, at the beginning, we may do a great job in recruitment. And then once we start getting people to join our teams, things start falling apart. And this is exactly what we are going to discuss with Steve. So how to manage a company and manage a small team more effectively through entrepreneur operating system, which is exactly what we are going to talk about. So I cannot wait to start. Steven, why don't you tell us a bit more about how have you guys at College Recruiter started using the entrepreneur operating system?
The entrepreneur's operating system, which most people will just abbreviate to EOS, comes from a book called Attraction, Get a Grip on Your Business. The author is Gino Wickman. At College Recruiter, the business that I help to run, me personally, we have nothing to do with it. I'm not like involved in selling the books or doing any consulting. We're fans of it. You might in some ways call me an evangelist of it because I want to spread it. I have found it to be incredibly helpful to our business and to others. But essentially what it is it's probably the best business book I've ever read. Most business books are 200, 300, 400 pages and should be 2. And they'll have like 6 good ideas and that's about it. This book, every single page is valuable. It has a lot of lists and these are the 12 things that you should do when you schedule a meeting. These are the 4 things that you should do when you're hiring somebody. So it's got a lot of graphs, tables, etc. in there like a workbook. But essentially what it does for small organizations, it can be 5 people, it can be 25 people, but once you get to be about 250 people, the author says it just doesn't work well anymore. But it really enables you to run your business far more efficiently and effectively. You have fewer meetings, fewer people in the meetings, and you get a lot more done in those meetings. And then even more importantly, when your meetings are finished or when your communication with one of your coworkers is finished, there's tremendous clarity. Everybody knows what's expected of them. They know who's supposed to do what, how, and by when. So if you've ever heard about managing up, where an employee is supposed to manage the expectations of their manager. Yes, I'm going to do that work that you've asked me to do, but it's going to take me a week. And these are the resources that I need. So when I get those resources from you, my manager, then I can get started on it, and then it will take me a week. So, hey, manager, when will I get those resources? So a lot of times in organizations, it's just left unsaid. Who's supposed to do what and by when and how? And we all just sort of trust that somehow it's going to work out, that people will somehow know what's expected of them and how they're supposed to do the work and by when. The reality is we don't. Maybe most of the time, but there are loads of times where a manager might ask you to do something. You might take a day to do it, and your manager's upset because she thought it would only take an hour. Or your manager thought it would take a day, but instead it takes a week. So you think you're doing it in a proper amount of time and your manager thinks that you're taking way too long. That's often not a sign that you've done the work poorly or not fast enough. That's just often a sign that the manager, that you and your manager were not on the same page, that you didn't have the right expectations. And EOS really eliminates a lot of that uncertainty. It's kind of hard to be unclear when you're running your meetings and communicating properly.
Well, this is so cool because this also happens to me personally while working with my colleagues, especially when something technical is involved, because I'm a technical person. I used to be a developer, so my technical savviness is a little above average. But when we assign some tasks to my colleagues who are not as tech savvy, then obviously it takes them longer. But sometimes it takes like 3 times or 5 times longer. And often we don't even know why. So maybe, there is nothing wrong about how the thing is done. It's about managing the expectations. So how to manage these expectations, how to set the expectation right, especially if the person has never done a particular task before and you don't have any benchmark to compare with.
It might be helpful just to sort of understand at a high level how you set your priorities within EOS if you follow it. So each year, the leadership team, it's usually comprised of somebody called a visionary. That's my role. That's usually somebody who is, well, they're setting the vision for the company. They're the person in the company who is best at understanding where that company needs to be maybe 3 years from now, 5 years from now. They're good at looking up and seeing other industries and what can you learn from other industries, looking at your competitors, your partners, your vendors, the labor supply, just external forces, not the things that are happening within your company day to day, but things that are happening outside of your company month to month and year to year. That's the visionary. There's also what's called the integrator. In most organizations, that person's going to have a job title of chief executive officer or president. It might be the founder, might be a co-founder, but it's somebody who's very, very good at communicating with and managing multiple divisions. So you might be a really, really fantastic manager for IT people and really, really horrible for accounting people, right? Two different kinds of people. You might be great at managing salespeople and horrible at even being able to understand developers. So if that's the case, you're not the integrator. The integrator needs to be somebody who has a lot of broad-based skills. They're probably good in almost all areas at managing, at communicating, and they're probably bad at nothing. And so in our company in College Recruiter, my wife, who is the majority owner, and she is our chief executive officer, she's the integrator. And then you have what's generally in most organizations called your C-suite, your chief operating officer, your chief technology officer, maybe chief marketing officer, those sorts of people. They report to the integrator. That's your leadership team. And in most organizations, you're going to have 5, 6, 7, 8 of those people. Together, once a year, you have a 2-day, hopefully offsite. During COVID, that was a little bit more difficult, but we literally did get together offsite, but it was by Zoom. So we were all kind of like out of our offices, but still not in the same office together. And you decide where you want the business to be, say 5 or 10 years from now. And it's just at a very, very high level. We want $10 million in sales. We want to be serving 200 customers. We want to be placing 50 candidates a month, some kind of attainable, but real stretch kind of goal. Well, to get there in 5 or 10 years, where do you need to be 3 years from now? And so then you set that 3-year goal. That's a little bit more specific. And to get there in 3 years, where do you need to be by the end of this year? So there's your 1-year goal. And again, that gets a little bit more specific. And then the magic starts to happen. So very, very, very few people can be focused on a goal that's even a year from now. let alone 3 or 5 years from now. We get distracted. We get involved in things that we think today are important, but they're actually not to reach that 1 or 3 or 5 year goal. So what EOS does is it breaks down most of what really matters into 90-day cycles, 3 months. Most people can focus, especially at a managerial level, on 3 months. And you create what are called rocks, which are goals. And by the end of that 90-day period, did you hit your rock? Did you hit your goals? And everything that you're doing on a day-to-day, hour-to-hour basis should be moving you closer to hitting that rock. And so every single week in your leadership team meeting, you're going to report to your coworkers, are you on track or off track with those rocks? And that's it. That's, you just literally say on track or off track. If you're off track, if they're having problems, then you're going to discuss it. If you're on track, you don't discuss it. So you save a lot of time. You're not telling people stuff that they already know or that they don't need to know. So you save a tremendous amount of time. And it also means that you're not having to communicate that to as many people, so you don't suck up everybody's time. And then you have what are called to-dos. In your weekly meetings, what are the things that you need to do in the next week to week and a half in order to stay on track for that rock? And that, for line employees, for say people who aren't on the leadership team, that works incredibly well for them, because when they get to their desks at say 8 o'clock in the morning, and they've got 3 to-dos, those are the most important things for them to do that day. Not fix the photocopy machine, go get coffee, answer this call, answer these 48 emails. Those things can be important and you do want to do them, but you don't want to do them before you do the really important work, before, for a typical line employee, you're doing your to-dos. And everybody in the company has what they call a number. So if I want to know, Michael, if you are doing your job, if you're providing the kind of value to the company that you really should be, it's super simple. So let's say you're in a sales role, and let's say you oversee the sales department, and your sales department and your company wants to do $10 million in sales this year. In a 90-day period, that probably means that you want to have $2.5 million in revenue, just $10 million divided by 4 quarters. And maybe it's seasonal, so maybe it's 200,000 or 400,000 or whatever, but let's just say it's 250,000. You're going to have that number, $250,000 for the quarter. And then if you're on track for that, we know that you're doing your job well, that if you've run into problems, you've reached out and got the necessary help, you've brought issues to our attention that are maybe getting in your way, hey, the product fails, we didn't invoice the customer, we forgot to invoice them, and therefore it's not showing up in my sales, but it should be, things along those lines that you just run into. So if your number is way off at any level in the organization, then it's super easy for you and your manager to realize, hey, there's a problem here. Maybe the problem is something you're doing, but more times than not, the problem is actually created by the leadership team. The problem is you were supposed to go out and do something in the next 90 days, and you were counting on having 4 hours a day to get that done. But your manager keeps throwing a whole bunch of work at you. And so if you get 4 minutes in a day, that's a lot. Well, is it your fault that you're being given a whole ton of work that's preventing you from doing what's really important? No, that's your manager's fault. But by communicating that early in the process, especially, then everybody's on the same page. Maybe things need to be adjusted. I mean, heck, when COVID really hit, our plans went out the window, because the plans that we made in December of 2019 for what 2020 was going to look like, by February, we knew that that was not going to happen. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and so many different challenges pop up just in my mind now, for example, with engaging people also remotely, right? It's
Yeah.
probably easier to communicate some of these on track or off track kind of signals, but how do you do it with people working remotely and probably even in different time zones? Like, how do you catch up with your team? You have about 20 people on your team, right? Plus
Yep.
some external contractors.
Yeah, correct. So great question. When we started the business, when I started the business way back in 1991, so 31 years ago, didn't know anything about EOS. When we started to be a fully remote company back in 1997, we didn't know anything about EOS. We really first learned about it about 5 years ago. My wife, who's our CEO slash integrator, she and I used it just between the two of us for about a year so we could kind of learn about it, spread it to the leadership team for another year or two. And then a couple of years ago, we went company wide. And one of the unexpected benefits for us was that as a fully remote company with people kind of spread all over the place, that it became far easier to manage a remote workforce. So we look back and it's like, wow, I don't know how we could have done a decent job of managing people across different countries, time zones, et cetera, without this kind of system. And I think the reality is we were like probably most organizations that, yeah, we were getting our work done, but we weren't getting it done very well. We had quality issues. We were making mistakes that we shouldn't have been making. Things got forgotten. Things fell through the cracks. Oh, I thought you were doing that. No, I thought you were doing that. We never talked about who was supposed to do it. So the problem wasn't that Joe didn't do it or Sally didn't do it. The problem was that Joe and Sally didn't talk about who was going to do it. There's a difference, right? Neither one of them were really ignoring it. They just each thought the other were supposed to do it. So with EOS, it's really, really clear who's to do what, how, and by when. And so you manage by outcomes. That is really scary to a lot of managers because the reality is most managers are terrible at managing. They manage by process. Michael, did you come into the office this morning at 8? Did you leave at 5? Did you take only half an hour for lunch? Did you send 60 emails? Did you get this coding? Did you code 1,000 lines? Whatever those sort of almost irrelevant metrics are that most managers work with, they want to see you sweating. If you're sweating, you must be working hard. If you're working hard, you must be doing a good job. No, definitely not. You can be sweating and working really hard and be working on the wrong things and have your priorities all messed up. You can be reaching out as a salesperson to a whole bunch of companies and having a whole bunch of meetings, and none of them are leading to sales, or they're leading to sales, but the sales aren't profitable. You're selling the wrong things or you're pricing them wrong. So by managing by outcome, which are the rocks and the to-dos in EOS, then your remote workforce doesn't have to have somebody looking over their shoulder every minute of every day. The manager doesn't have to be trying to get that person back on track. Oh, hey, Fred, I see that you've been answering all of these emails over the last couple hours, and those emails do need to be answered, but not until tomorrow, because we have a deadline of 4 p.m. today for this customer. If we don't get this proposal over to them by 4 p.m., we are going to lose this $2 million sale. So we need to prioritize that proposal, and then tomorrow we'll get to those emails. That kind of priority work in EOS is really simple because everybody knows what's expected of them and what the highest priority should be. In most organizations, the employee just doesn't understand that. They didn't know that there was a 4 p.m. deadline, or they did, but they didn't think that it really mattered to them because somebody else was going to do that work. So as so many of sort of knowledge-based organizations have gone either fully remote or now maybe hybrid, 2 days in the office, 3 days at home or whatever. And I think a lot of your listeners fit into that category. It really helps to simplify, and you're not having to check in every day. Like I hear a lot of organizations will have like a team meeting for an hour by Zoom every day. You don't have to do that with EOS. Maybe you have a 15-minute stand up and just kind of make sure that everybody's on the same page. It's almost like a little bit of a pep talk, kind of get everybody motivated, and then you're on. But you're not going to have those meetings where you've got 12 people in the meeting, 3 people are doing all the talking, and 9 people leave the meeting at the end of the meeting and wondering why the heck they were even there. It just doesn't happen.
Wow, that's now I feel like I have to read this book really quick because our challenges will be solved with this new approach. And a lot of the recruiters we work with inside the academy or the agencies we consult for, they start as a one-man show, then they hire a few people and they work with them remotely because the whole IT recruitment is online and remote to a large extent these days. So
yeah,
when would you say is the right time to introduce a solution like this? When the person is just starting out, probably doesn't need any operating system, right? And when they reach people, it starts breaking. So when is the right time to start introducing something like this?
Yeah. Oh, great question. So way back in 91, so when I started the business, it was just me. And I started it with $200. It was enough money to buy a fax machine and business cards. That was like the total investment at that time. I already had a typewriter when typewriters were a thing. I already had a computer and just sort of some basic office supplies, desk chair, whatever. So when it's just you, there is no need for a system like this. When there are 2 of you, it can start to be helpful. Like the experience that I had with my wife, who's our CEO / integrator, it was helpful to us to start to use EOS because it gave us the framework or sort of the rules or guidelines as to how to create goals. That 10-year or 5-year goal, that 3-year goal, that 1-year goal, the 90-day rocks. So we didn't do a very good job at it, but it was better than nothing. And we were starting to learn how to write up goals. So for example, you don't want to write a goal that is very, very subjective, where at the end of that 90-day period of time, you might think that you hit your goal, but somebody else can look at how you wrote it down and they might think you did not. So something like increase sales by a lot. If that's your goal, what does a lot mean? So let's say that during the last 90-day period, your sales were $100,000. And the next period, they're $150,000. Is that a lot? Maybe. So instead of writing down a goal like increase sales by a lot, you would say increase sales to $150,000. If you're at $149,000, you missed your rock. You didn't hit that rock. And that's a bit of a bummer. But on the other hand, if it's just you and somebody else, you can look at that and you'd both feel pretty good. You were really, really close. But if your sales were $130,000, then you both know, hey, you missed it by a lot. You missed it by $20,000. And so what was the problem? Were you too optimistic in setting the rock? Did a pandemic come? Did your coworker not give you the support that you needed? And you kind of diagnose that and you get better and better as you move forward. So once you get to 2 people, it starts to become somewhat beneficial. Once you start to have managers over individual departments, somebody managing operations, somebody managing sales, somebody managing technology, then I think that's when it becomes really, really helpful. And I see that a lot in organizations with even just 4, 5, 6 people. So, from what I understand of the listeners to your podcast, a whole lot of them fit into that category. They have 5, 10, maybe 20 employees. And again, EOS says, I think pretty explicitly, that the system kind of breaks down when you get to be about 250 employees. I don't know why. Quite frankly, I don't know why it would break down at 250 employees. Maybe they're just, I don't know. I'd be curious. I'm going to have to find that out. So maybe the next time we'll talk, I'll report back.
Once your company reaches that point, and then you will know why it breaks.
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome. And you also mentioned it's important to set expectations and follow up on them. So do you use Slack or Microsoft Teams or Confluence or some other knowledge base? Like, how do you actually capture those expectations and communicate them effectively?
Yeah. So we use a variety of tools. We're 100% SaaS based. So all of our software is in the cloud. That's also really important, and especially for remote workforce. If you've got people who are running, the old version of Outlook where all their emails are on their hard drive, well, they probably have bigger issues to deal with. If it's a one-man shop, no big deal. If you've got 20 people and you're spread across, 7 different countries and 4 different time zones, that's a big deal, because it just means that you're not able to share information. And if somebody leaves the company, how do you get that back from them? If their computer is sitting on their desk and you're in a big corporate headquarters and they leave the company, you've still got the computer. But if they're in Thailand and, you're in Slovakia and they leave the country or they leave the company, good luck getting that hard drive back. So all of the tools that we use, we use Slack. That came at the urging of our tech workers. They had been using it internally. They felt like that was a really great tool for communicating across the company. We have different channels in there, so we'll direct message. Pretty much all of our internal non-urgent communication is through Slack. We have a rule that if you Slack something, by definition, it's not urgent. So somebody can get it and review it and deal with it later today or tomorrow, kind of thing. If it's urgent, phone or text. And usually that's going to be something like, we're a job search site. So our customers or employers that advertise their job openings with us, if their job posting ad on our site has a typo in the job title, or the link to go to their site to apply is broken, that's urgent. We got to deal with that right now. And so that's the kind of thing that we're typically going to text. The tech department also uses Jira by Atlassian as essentially a ticketing and prioritization system, so that they can keep track of the different tasks and projects that they have, and better to be able to prioritize them, and also assign project A is going to go to one of our developers and project B is going to go to another developer, and then they can kind of keep track as to what they did, and they really like it. Personally, I despise Jira because and so I've taken myself off of it. I was getting dozens of notifications a day that this little piece has been done, and that little piece has been done, and that little piece has been done. And if you're the developer who's working on it, that's fine. But if you're just on the business side and all you want to know is the project has been completed 2 weeks from now, I don't want to be told 24 different things on the way to that place. Just tell me when you're done. And so that's what we do. And I know that Jira does have the capability of doing that, but it just sort of didn't come naturally within our environment. Everybody was getting notified about everything. information overload. We use Google Workspace for the email. So we use basically the corporate version of Gmail. And along with that is the Google Docs and Sheets and whatever they call the equivalent of PowerPoint, the calendaring system. One thing that we do a little bit differently that maybe some of your listeners might benefit from with our calendaring system is that to improve efficiency, if we're scheduling a meeting, we can just look at anybody else's calendar within the company. And if they have an opening in a particular period of time, we can just schedule the meeting. So maybe you've heard the expression, it's better to ask for forgiveness than for permission. Yeah. So if you were working for College Recruiter, and I wanted to schedule a meeting with you, either just the two of us or maybe with a customer or a partner, and I saw that Friday morning you had nothing on your calendar, I could go ahead and add you to that meeting. You could come back and you could say, I can't attend, or I shouldn't attend, or whatever, for whatever reason, but I can still put it on your calendar. So I don't have to go to you and 7 other people and say, hey, does this time work? Does that time work? Can everybody send me their availability? That kind of thing drives me bonkers. That the whole does this time work? Does that time work? Does that time work? We spend so much time trying to, or people spend so much time trying to schedule meetings, and that really, really improves things. So generally it really incentivizes each of us to keep our calendars up to date. And then if you know that you have a doctor's appointment, or you know what, you've worked a whole lot this week and you're going to take Friday off, then you really need to block off that time on your calendar, because otherwise somebody's going to schedule something for you, and then you're going to have to tell them that you can't make it, and then you're going to block that time off on your calendar anyway. So you might as well just do it right to begin with. So it's sort of a preventative effort.
Oh, cool. And then when you have the meeting, as you mentioned, everyone is taking some notes. How do you then communicate these expectations so that you also remember a week or so? Do you store it somewhere, not in Jira, I understood, but do you have some other expectations in progress?
So the meetings in under EOS, they're called level 10 meetings, L10, and actually only one person takes notes. So everybody else is fully engaged. You are supposed to be able to show up to the meeting. The leadership team meetings, for example, that I'm in are every Wednesday. And we have one of the members of the leadership team, right now it happens to be our chief technology officer, who's assigned the role of scribe, that she's the one who takes notes and updates things in a shared Google Doc. So we all have access to that document, and our rocks and our to-dos, etc., are detailed in that document. Because it's a Google Doc, the revision history is easy. If we ever wanted to look back and see what did it say over there 2 months ago, we can do that. Rarely is that an issue. It's a living, breathing document, and what really matters is what does it say right now. So when we finish the meeting on Wednesday, if I have a to-do, I should finish that before the next meeting, the next Wednesday. Well, a lot of times by Monday, I might be like, I know I was supposed to do something, and I don't remember what it was. We've all been there. We all do that all the time. I know, Cindy and I had a meeting, and I remember we were talking about this customer, and she had this problem, and I said that I was going to run this report, and for the life of me, I can't remember what it is. And maybe I didn't write it down, or maybe I did, but I can't figure out from my notes what I was supposed to do. So in most organizations, what happens? So now on Monday, I reach out to Cindy. Hey, Cindy, you remember that report that you asked me to run? What was that again? And now Cindy replies back to you, maybe on Tuesday, maybe on Wednesday. oh, Michael, it was supposed to be blank. Well, and hopefully her reply makes sense, and then you can just go and run it. But a lot of times that might raise more questions. And so it's like, oh, well, did you want that in Excel or did you want that as a PDF? Did you want me to only send that to you, or did you also want me to send that to your manager? You know, it just, you kind of end up having the same conversation multiple times. With EOS, you just simply go back to the L10 meeting notes that were taken while you're in the meeting contemporaneously, and you go and you look at your to-do, and it should be really clear, because at the end of the L10 meeting, in the last 5 or so minutes, everybody reads their to-dos. And so if you had 3 to-dos, you would literally read word for word your first to-do, send Cindy a report in a PDF format to show the 5 customers with the most sales this quarter and what the sales were for each customer. Got it. And you would say, got it. And then you move on to your next one. And then you move on to your next one. And then each person does that in turn. So at the end of the meeting, with 100% clarity, everybody knows exactly who's supposed to do what, by when, and how. And it is amazing. Almost every week, somebody will realize, oh, well, wait a second. This isn't clear to me. I don't get it. Or I can't get that done by next week. I'm going to need 2 weeks, or I need Fred to do something before I can work on this. Okay, if that's the case, now Fred has a to-do. Get this done so that Michael can then get his to-do done. So it really is incredibly valuable, I think, for organizations that are spread across different time zones, across different countries, different cities, even though, and I think you were saying that one of your coworkers is in the same city as you, but you don't get together all that often. Whether you're in person or whether you're connecting by Zoom, it really helps a ton.
I see. That's very cool. We will start doing this, I guess, right away after I read. So I know what is L10, and I'm just curious about L9, L8, L7, etc.
I know what I think the 10 is a reference to the rating of the meetings. So the very, very last thing that you do, I said it was to-dos, but now I'm remembering, the very last thing you do is everybody gives a rating to the meeting. How do you think the meeting went? And rather than saying like good or okay or last week's was better, you give a number. It's objective, it's measurable. And the idea is you want every meeting to be a 10. 10 does not mean perfect. 10 means that the meeting got you what you needed to get through the next week to week and a half. You know that this is what you're supposed to be doing in the next week, and that it was better than the previous week's meeting. So if the meeting didn't go as well as the previous week's meeting, let's say it ran long, or there was some kind of like unnecessary conflict or something like that, you might give it a 7 or an 8 or a 9. If the meeting was, pardon my French, a total shit show, people didn't show up, you didn't figure things out, people went way off on tangents, like maybe I am now. But if it was like a really bad meeting, really ineffective, you're leaving a meeting really unclear what you're supposed to do over the next week, you might give it a 3. We had meetings early on when we were using EOS that were probably 3s and 4s until we were kind of learning it. Now, in our leadership team meeting, we have 7 people in the meetings. The scores this past week, I think one person said an 8. A bunch of people, maybe 3 people said 10s, and I think most of us were in like the 9 range. So that's pretty good. That's an indicator to the leader of the meeting, the integrator, that the meeting went pretty well. There's room for improvement, but it went pretty well. People kind of know what they're supposed to do over the next week.
Awesome. And during these meetings, now when I'm just thinking about some ad hoc stuff that needs to happen, you assign a task, right? Like that's sort of quite clear now after we discussed it. But how do you suggest fellow recruiters and recruitment leaders, how do they organize, for example, some recurring tasks? For example, they may have a few sourcers, a few recruiters on the team, and there
Mhm.
are some recruiting tasks, for example, to source candidates, right? And you don't have
Yeah,
to do it every week. There is no point in saying like this week you are sourcing, right? Because the person is sourcing anyway.
right.
Well, there may be some clash. So how do you organize meetings regarding these recurring tasks? Just thinking about KPIs, thinking about the quality of the
Mhm.
work, meeting standards. Like, is this something that EOS also covers?
Yes. So I'm glad that you mentioned KPIs, key performance indicators. And people who are familiar with KPIs and who like KPIs will totally understand EOS, and they'll like it too, because you're managing by numbers. So if you have a KPI, if you're a sourcer, you might have a KPI of generate a list of 100 full stack developers in the Czech Republic every 2 weeks, something like that. And then those CVs, resumes, profiles, call them what you will, those then may get handed off to, say, a hiring manager or to a recruiter. But whatever the process is within your agency, that's going to vary. But if their KPI is 100 of those profiles every 2 weeks, then you're absolutely right. That's not something that's going to be a to-do in EOS, but it probably is going to translate into a ROC. So that person's ROC, if there are, say, 12 weeks in the quarter, you're going to take 12 weeks times 100 profiles. So you're going to have 1,200 profiles in the quarter. And each week, they're going to say that for their ROC, that 1,200 profiles for the quarter, I'm on track, I'm off track. If they're on track, it probably means that they are getting the 100 a week, or they have a good plan for catching up. Maybe they're even ahead of where they need to be. If they're off track, then that means that they do not think by the end of the quarter that they're going to get there, that they're going to fall short of that 1,200. That becomes an issue. That then gets discussed probably in that meeting, maybe the next one if you just run out of time. And out of that discussion with your leaders, your recruiting team, whatever department is using that L10, and each department will have its own L10 meeting. So the leadership team has a meeting, the tech team has a meeting, the recruiting team or HR or whatever you might call it. Each team has a meeting, and that will generally create a to-do or 2 or 3. So, for example, let's say you have a LinkedIn recruiter license, and George in finance forgot to pay the bill. And so you've lost access to your recruiter license. Well, if that recruiter license is necessary to you being able to generate 100 profiles a week, and George did not renew your recruiter license, George gets a to-do to renew your recruiter license. And so at the end of the meeting, George is going to read it and it's going to be like, by Tuesday, renew Michael's recruiter license and tell him, and got it. So during the meeting, everybody is going to know, again, sort of what is required of them and by when. Otherwise, in most organizations, at least ones that I've been a part of, George will be like, oh, Michael, yes, I'm sorry. I forgot. I was on vacation. I should have taken care of this before I left. I'll get it renewed for you. And you'll trust George to get it renewed in a timely manner. Well, what George committed to you in most organizations was to get it renewed. Is he going to get it renewed today, a week from now, a month from now, 4 years from now? You didn't agree. Maybe George doesn't realize how important it is that he gets that done today or tomorrow. And so by having that to-do that's really clear, George knows that he needs to get that done today or tomorrow so that you can get back on track for your ROC. It is something that is really, really hard for people who are used to process. I mean, think of like a typical customer service person where they have 87 things that they need to do today. And what they're used to doing is working through what's on their desk from oldest to newest. Well, this person contacted me 5 days ago. I need to get back to them before the person who contacted me today. That's typically how customer service people operate, or they operate based upon who's screaming at them the loudest.
Mhm.
Or maybe who gave them a box of chocolates last week. You know,
Mhm.
it's just sort of somewhat arbitrary ways of prioritizing your work. But if they know this is what their rock is, this is what their to-dos are, then they focus first on those things, and those are the most important. And then they get to the things that are less important.
Yeah, yeah, I see, I see. And from what you say, it looks like it also requires some level of professionalism or some level of work ethics, or how to say it, like some experience with self-management and productivity, discipline.
Mm.
I'm just thinking if this could also be applied with junior team members, because I mean, like what you described seems to be like smooth and easy for people who have been doing business for 10, 20, 30 years, right?
Yeah.
So is this something that you would also advise to people who are just starting out and they can only afford people who are rather on the junior side of things?
So that's a great point. I guess the way I would think of that is managing by KPIs or rocks and to-dos in with EOS is something that a better manager, not necessarily more experienced. You can be very experienced and be really crappy. But generally, if you're going to have a lot of experience, if you've had a lot of success, you're probably going to understand the importance of managing by outcomes, and you'll probably also be better at it. People who are really junior, right out of school, your typical, say, 21, 22-year-old, they're probably not used to that yet. And if you just sort of throw the book at them and say, use this, they're probably going to fail. But a manager who's been not managing by outcomes, who's been managing based upon how much sweat their employees exert, and that's how he or she has been managing for 30 or 40 years, that manager probably also won't succeed because they're probably set in their ways. They're going to be resistant to it. So my suggestion would be to do somewhat like what we did, but faster. We took too long. We took like 5 years. And I think you could do it easily in a year or two. But my suggestion would be to start with the leadership team and get the leadership team on board and get them used to it. And then a member of your leadership team might be like your head of sales. That person now really understands EOS and they're living it and they're breathing it at a leadership team level, then they can bring it to their department. So year one, leadership team. Year two, it's the sales department, operations department, tech department, etc. So if you've got one person in each department who is good at it and embraces it, then you're going to be good. What you're also going to find is that there will inevitably be people within your organization who just refuse to follow the process. They will hate managing by outcomes. We actually lost a member of our leadership team because that person just it was so difficult for them to be accountable, to say, I'm going to do this by a certain date. They had spent their entire career kind of trusting that everybody would do their job in a timely manner. They wanted other people to trust them to do their job in a timely manner. And just never sunk in that getting your work done in a timely manner ignores priorities. Some work is more important than other work. Some work needs to be done today, and other work can wait until next week. And if you don't have that communication internally, how are you possibly supposed to know what work should come first and what work should come second? So they ended up leaving the company, not because they lacked skills, not because they did a bad job, just because they simply couldn't function within that EOS world. So I do think any listeners that are thinking about going over and using EOS, they need to be prepared for the possibility that one or more of their employees just will not fit anymore. And, you know, there's the door, don't slam it on your way out. And again, it's not that they're a bad person. It's not that their work quality is bad, but they're bringing down the rest of the team. They're holding everybody back, and better for them to go to another organization where they can add really great value there, and then for you to replace them with somebody. It would be awesome, Michael. And if any of your listeners are thinking about creating a job board, one thing that doesn't exist that I've looked for is I've never found a job board that specializes in people who have EOS experience. It'd be kind of neat. You know, there are job boards for people with like Salesforce programming experience, or people who are there are going to be job boards for people who all they do is develop Slack applications. I mean, they're like some really weird, really tiny niche sites. If we were going out and looking for like a campaign management specialist who has been using EOS for 3 years, that person would be of really great interest to us, because we don't have to teach them how to use EOS. And so they would get off to a faster start with us.
That's very interesting idea. And I'm also thinking now, because a lot of organizations may apply agile methodology, the Scrum or Kanban. How does the EOS fit with some of these? Do you still have, for example, stand-ups every day as Scrum suggests, or is this something that replaces Scrum?
So I'm not involved in those within our organization. So I don't think I can speak very well to it, but I'm happy to share what I know. So our tech department continues to have a daily stand-up. It's usually 15 minutes. And that daily stand-up, in my mind, being very uneducated about what goes on in a tech department, and I am very uneducated, I question why they have it. Because if everybody has to-dos and rocks, I kind of feel like they should know what they're supposed to be doing. But what I've been told repeatedly by people who know a hell of a lot more than I do about what really goes on in a tech department is that daily stand-up, it's like 15 minutes long, is absolutely vital to them knowing that not only is this important and not only does this need to get done this week, but I need you to do this today. And so it really helps them to prioritize the day. I've also heard from one or two of our developers that it's kind of a daily pep call, like to kind of get everybody moving and everybody excited about what they're going to accomplish today. And then if there are problems, hey, that thing I was supposed to get done on Monday, well, today it's Tuesday. I didn't get it done yesterday, and here's why. And then other people can chime in and say, oh, yeah, you know what, I ran across that in the previous job, and here's what you need to do. Or here's a great video, or here's a great website, or go over to GitHub. Somebody has this thread. I remember seeing this a couple of weeks ago, whatever, and there's the solution. So I know that the tech team really believes very strongly in those daily stand-ups. We also just hired a new director of tech and software. And I remember from talking to him in his first couple of days that he's a big believer in Agile. Quite frankly, I don't really understand it because I've never been a tech person. But his previous company used EOS and they were using the Agile system, and he said that they coexist. So it's not a replacement. The way he describes it is that they're very complementary.
Interesting, especially for
Yeah.
the IT teams. Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, great. Well, we could talk about this topic forever, right? Like this is something that I'm also very interested in personally, because we have similar challenges as you described at the beginning. So, anyway, like I guess, covered the most important, especially for fellow recruiters out there who are listening to this podcast or watching this YouTube video, and they wonder how to start with this operating system. So, what's the name of the book they could purchase on Amazon? I know you are not affiliated in any way. You mentioned, but what's the name of the book?
Yeah, the book is called Traction: Get a Grip on Your Business. The author is Gino Wickman. And yeah, I'd love to get a 10% commission on every sale, but I'm not going to get anything. I've just, since I was a little kid, I've always been a big believer in efficiency, in just like not wasting time. If I'm going to spend an hour working on something, I'd rather that hour actually produce something that's really important. Rather than spending an hour working and it doesn't help the company or my department or my coworker or whatever. I think every good employee wants the same thing. They want to make the best use of their time. So, whether it's EOS or anything else, but this is the first, book process that I've run across. I'm 56, and it's the first time I've run across something like this that's specifically written for small businesses, for everybody in the company, the most junior employee right up all the way up. And it really takes into account different people's roles, different people, how they operate. Are you a very methodical, linear person, or are you very ADHD and you're all over the place? It's flexible enough for that. So it's made a huge difference at College Recruiter. Since we really started using it, our sales are up 30 to 50% year over year. We have a much healthier lifestyle. People are not working evenings and weekends trying to catch up. We are much calmer in meetings, much more diplomatic and cordial, because we just rarely have those discussions of, Michael, what do you mean you didn't get that done? And you're looking back at them, well, I didn't know I was supposed to do that. Or I thought you just wanted me to do that sometime this month. I didn't know you needed that done last week. It eliminates so much of that unnecessary conflict.
Well, I'm buying this book today. Yeah, I would love the commissioner if it went your way. It's a pity it doesn't, but the best part is that apparently it works, right? You implemented it works. So why not to give it a try, definitely. So wonderful. And if people would like to connect with you and the College Recruiter, where can they find more about you?
Yeah, I think feel free to contact me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/IN/Steven, STEVEN, Rothberg, ROTHBERG. I am, or email me, Steven@collegerecruiter.com. We don't sell, we don't do consulting or anything like that on EOS. This is just, I think, what we could call a case study. It's like, here's an organization that's somewhat in our space. It's a job board that uses EOS, and you and I both thought that a lot of your listeners running recruiting agencies could benefit from it also. So hey, if a couple of them do, and it makes our world a better place, then this conversation will have been well worth it.
Very cool, very cool. Thanks a lot for sharing these insights and thoughts and yeah, for showcasing you as a case study. Very helpful. So I'll let you know about how we implement some of these strategies as well. So I will keep in touch definitely. So thanks for joining the show, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you so much.